Okay, thanks for having me here.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm quite, I guess this is the first time I'm really talking about PGB outside of my own beta group. So it's always nice to have an
good.
audience.
Yeah, we were excited to have you on here, and I know that a lot of people who will be in the audience. There'll be some people kind of joining in as we get talking here, but a lot of our friends here at Mimic use your software and swear by it. So this was a natural progression to get you on here. So very excited to have this.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks. Yeah.
if you want to, and we'll also be recording this to put on YouTube later.
Oh, okay,
So that
great, great. Yeah, that's yeah. I can also I know one or two might join from my beta group, but
yeah,
yeah, I would be able to share it. That'll be great too.
perfect. Yeah. Uh, so if you want to just start with some basic introductions to what PGGB is and talk about upsampling a little bit so that people can mm, come to terms with what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I had a nice
Ooh.
blue set of three PowerPoint slides. I really like what Rob Watts does with his presentations. Well,
Yeah.
someday I will be able to do it, but today no. But you had some really great questions. I will want. We may go over time, and if I'm perfectly fine with doing this in two parts if need be,
Yeah, perfect.
because you know how audio files are. Once we start talking, we never stop.
Yes.
So yeah, that's. But quick introduction about myself. I mean, other than ZB is not my real name. At someday, I hope I can reveal my own name.
Yes.
But I've been. I mean, I'm both an academic and a researcher, and I've been also, and my research area covers a wide range of topics, including
Mhm.
audio, but not limited to audio, signal processing, machine learning.
Yeah.
Um, I've always had fun with audio for since I ever, for a long, long time. I've been doing this. I've been in audio for probably about 20, well, yeah, 15 to 20 years. PGGB only started out of pandemic boredness, really.
As
Like,
most of the best projects did.
yeah, so that's how PGB started, and we had. I mean, I did. I want to be very honest in saying that whatever robots does is really it. It kind of made me think, and it appealed to me because it made perfect sense. As a signal processing person, it
Yeah.
made perfect sense, and I was like, why does no one ever do this before? But there are reasons, and I discovered because I tried to do that
Yeah.
myself, and then I figured, oh, okay, these are all the issues you start facing once you start doing that, and that's how the project started. And then when it reached a point where I thought, okay, this looks like this might sound better than the M scalar, and then I shared it with a
Hmm.
few of my friends, and that rest is history, really. And we kept improving on it. I'm really, I think PGB is what it is, not because of all the math and all the effort I put in. It is what it is of listening to feedback from people who really care about music. About listening. It's not graphs, it's not math. It's about enjoying music and really and being able to provide honest feedback on what they hear. And so when I tweak something, I hear something, but I'm biased. You know,
Yeah.
but I'm open to any sort of criticism or comments, and that's how I made PGB very well. I had an open mind, and that really helped in getting where I am. But that's kind of a long introduction, but that's what it is.
That's okay.
It's good that you started with a question that says, what is upsampling? Because, a lot of times you feel like, you do a lot of explanation and people come back and ask, the very basic question: what is upsampling?
Yes.
You can no matter what, the rest is really not that important. What is upsampling? Before you can understand what's upsampling, have to understand what is sampling, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, we live in an analog world, and so the process of sampling is what gets your analog into digital form. And the way you can think of it is you live in a continuous world, you take a picture from your camera, it's a snapshot. So it is a snapshot of what you see in a specific point in time.
Hmm.
Now, you take the same snapshot multiple times, you get a movie.
Yeah.
The more frames you have, the more realistic, and of course, you are assuming you are able to play that all back fast enough, the more less jittery it's going to be, or it won't look like stop motion, right? The
Yeah.
more you have. So that's basically what upsampling does is first you sample, which
Hmm.
means you take snapshots of music you're recording, which basically is the loudness level at a given point in time. That's kind of a sample, and you record it, and you do that hopefully in equal intervals of time. It never happens, but let's just say it
Exactly.
sampled
Yeah.
equal intervals of time, and CD rates is typically 44. 44 100 means you're basically taking 44 100 snapshots every second of
Hmm.
the music that is being recorded in two channels or multiple channels. So that's what sampling is in a very simple way. And each of these levels is translated to a value, and then stored in digital format.
Hmm.
And the promise of CD is that is enough to basically reproduce the music perfectly in the audible range, and it is true.
Yeah.
Mostly it's true. Um, so why do we need upsampling then? Well, upsampling is now CD's rate is good, but if you just play back at CD rate without doing anything, it may not sound that great.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, I know there are NO stacks and all that stuff, but it can be improved. Instead of saying it won't sound great or sounds bad, I would say it can be improved.
Yes. Hmm.
Just like a megapixel camera, right? The more pixels you add, the closer it might get to your phone.
Yeah.
That's the idea of megapixel wars is basically you add more pixels, more resolution, try to get closer to the
Hmm.
analog. So similarly, in case of upsampling, what you're trying to do is add more samples in between existing samples, because the more and more samples you add, the closer and closer it gets to the real world. Because in the real world, there are no samples; it's a one continuous thing. So infinite samples.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is so. So the process of upsampling basically tries to guess these intermediate samples.
Hmm.
I'm saying guess, but mathematically approximate so depending on the method you choose, you can guess, or you can just say, hey, I'm just going to choose the same value all the way,
Yeah.
like hold the value, or
Yeah.
I can just going to linearly, like if one is zero and the next is three, I'm just going
Hmm.
to say middle is going to be two,
Yeah.
linearly interpolate. But then there are complex forms of doing that. So there are multiple algorithms, multiple ways of doing this. That is why there's no one answer to upsampling. And
It,
but there's only one correct answer,
yes.
because the one correct answer is the real deal.
Yeah.
If you had sampled it at that exact point, what is the value you would have got? That is kind of the
Exactly.
holy grail of upsampling, because the whole point of upsampling is guessing the right value, and there's only one right value. So you can say all the algorithms you have in the world, but there can only be one that is right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of PGGB, to try to get to that right one at any cost. So well, basically that's and I think I kind of answered your next question too, but
Yeah.
so
I think so too. In terms of, I guess what you're saying is in terms of perfecting PCM is through upsampling. Is that correct? Because
yeah, yes,
you're
perfecting
filling in.
yeah, by basically trying to increase the sampling rate to a point where it's almost continuous,
Hmm.
to a point where you get as close to as possible, and then there's also constraints, like you reach a point where you can add more samples, but your playback system is just not up to it in terms of how much can it resolve,
Yes,
and all that.
they're still
That's
catching
always a
up on that.
problem. Yeah, and I want to give, and I'm more of a visual thinker. The analogy I always try to think of is like
Yeah.
megapixel wars.
Hmm.
You can add more megapixels, but the problem, there's a downside to megapixels, because more megapixels, there's also noise that comes along.
Yeah,
So
always.
similar things happen. So you don't want, there's a point where your system noise is going to be big enough to where it wouldn't stop mattering
Hmm.
much.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think for card DAX, for example, I think the magic number they chose is 705 or 768. So it seems
Yeah.
to be pretty good from what I've for the current generation of DAX at playing 24, 32 bits.
Yeah.
That seems to be a pretty good number, beyond which there's not much. I mean, you can still game, but the game reduces.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I know they stick with that number pretty much across their line for
Yeah,
the M scaler and Dave.
yeah,
Um, so I guess the next question would be, there are, you know, similarly to the M scaler, and I guess also like HQ player, and there's a bunch of softwares now that do upsampling even within the audio player. Is how does PGGB specifically provide something new or build upon this idea of perfecting PCM?
yeah, and yes. So I want to say that there's no simple, easy answer here, but I want to provide some background before we discuss the details. Upsampling is not just a software thing, right? Upsampling is
Hmm.
done everywhere in most DACs,
Yeah.
unless you have an NOS DAC. Upsampling is
Yes.
done. So DAC manufacturers have known for a long time, or rather, I would say the promise of digital is based on upsampling. Why did we
Hmm.
come up with CD rates? The assumption was you can take the CD rates, upsample it, and then convert it. That was the whole promise of CDs. So,
Hmm.
so the whole, everything digital, the whole digital playback is really built on the promise of perfect upsampling.
Yeah.
So it does. So all the dark manufacturers already know the benefits of upsampling, but they also know, in their own bias, different ways, that different ways of upsampling results in different sound, but DACs are really resource constrained, right? You have
Yeah.
chips and heat and power and everything.
Hmm.
And so you can only do so much on a DAC. And when you try to do that, I guess a lot of times the bias is on my DAC needs to measure well.
Yeah.
And when someone is going to tune for that, they're not necessarily looking for, or do not believe in, the subjective benefits, even within what's available, just
Hmm.
on the digital aspect of it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And so a lot of the choices are based on that, like, hey, can I have a steep filter because it makes the graph look better?
Yeah.
I can get if I use a minimum phase filter, I can probably get minus 120 dB. But if I use a
Hmm.
linear phase, I only get 100, even though the 100 might sound a little better.
Yeah.
So there's always compromises there. Given the space, what sort of filters can I choose? What will measure well? And I think until recently, when I know Rob was talking about all this, most of the focus was on frequency domain.
Hmm.
No one was talking about timing of transients or transient reproduction. Not much. I've not seen anything.
No.
So all the focus was on frequency domain performance, and that's what DAC manufacturers have done. Um, and I want to say software is no different.
Hmm.
And in fact, its software is more geared toward more pro audio until HQ Player came along. And,
Yeah.
and and pro audio is all about frequency response. And it's all going to be like, how big is the cutoff, how steep is this? I mean, how much is the attenuation, how steep is the cutoff, and so on. Just so whenever I'm talking about attenuation, basically what I'm saying is, you know, one of the things during upsampling, when you upsample, you get what's called images. Basically, you get the same frequency response copied multiple times over the frequency range,
Hmm.
because you started with 44 kilohertz and you want to go to 768. What
Mhm.
happens between the region between, because your actual content stops at 44. What is between 44 and the end?
Yes.
That is normally images. It's just copy of the same thing.
Uh-huh.
The hope is no, because you cannot hear past for 20. The invoice tax, manufacturer would say that, well, you cannot hear all that, so it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You don't have to filter it.
Exactly. And I know a lot of
But it
people
doesn't
have
look.
taken
Yeah,
that opinion.
yeah, I know. I mean, a lot of people are of that opinion because you don't hear it, so it should not do any damage.
Mhm.
Well, but it does not look good on measurements.
Yeah.
Right? That's why the dark manufacturers puts the filter in so that you don't see any of it.
Yeah.
So when I say stop band attenuation, that means cutting off all of the images. The more you cut off, the better.
Yeah.
The faster you cut off, that's the steep. How steep can you get? How
Yeah.
fast can you? That also looks good on measurement.
Gotcha.
So those are the things that DAC manufacturers look at. Even software developers look at for the purpose of pro audio, like Adobe Audition or
Mhm.
any software. SOX is free and it gives you more flexibility in some sense. You can even use sync filters there. Um, then you have HQ Player, and I want to say Juicy revolutionized computer audio when it came to providing software upsampling tools. Till then, I've used the HQ Player not so long back. I've enjoyed it. I've used it with i5 DAX. It
Mhm.
did, and I was able to hear the difference. So yes, it does something right. There's no
Agreed.
doubt about it. But
Yeah.
it's all based on who developed it and their biases and their beliefs.
Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
know you see strongly believes in the frequency domain performance. Nothing wrong with it because that's
Mhm.
what you see in graphs.
Yeah.
Um, but that is not the end all. That's not the because the frequency domain is important, but focusing only on frequency domain is a problem, and I will tell you, why. The time domain aspect is equally, if not more, important. And an analogy I like to give all the time is like an impulse or a gunshot. Okay,
Mhm.
when you shoot a gun and you measure it, you see just one blip on the screen. But if you do the frequency domain analysis of it, you will see it's a broadband. It's all across the spectrum. It's like all the frequencies arrive at the same instant in time, and you get a sharp noise.
Uh-huh.
What about white noise, right? If you
Yeah.
analyze the white noise, it too has the same similar frequency response, except all these frequencies arrive at different points in time.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's basically, so now if you're a frequency response guy, I'm a little oversimplifying it just for because to make it very easy for folks to understand.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
if you're a frequency response guy, you'll say, oh, okay, these two look the same, so they should sound the same.
Yeah.
And it cannot be far away from the truth. But in reality,
Exactly.
what we talk about is a lot more subtle than that. But this is an extreme example.
Yeah.
And
I
that is
think
why
it's a
it's
good example just to at
yeah.
least demonstrate, because the time component of that is interesting.
Yeah, and intuitively it makes sense. Like notes,
Uh-huh.
how they start, and if they don't, we talk about timing of notes, and if they are a little off, they don't sound real,
Yeah.
and you lose that, and depth and perception. It's like we live in an analog world. We are used to true sound as it arrives, and and we know how the timing has to be. We intuitively know that. We
Yeah.
may not, when you it's a lot of times you may not realize it is not when when a software does just frequency domain perfectly. It might sound good, nothing wrong, until you hear something better. And
Yeah.
that's always the audio, right? You just
Exactly.
don't know until you hear the right one.
Mhm.
And our ears can always say which is live and which is not,
Yeah.
right? No matter what, you can have speakers playing in a in a cafe, and you're walking by, and they are speakers versus live music going there. It's just different.
Yeah.
So in that sense, time domain is so important, and that is what makes a big difference when it comes to PGGB, because PGGB And again, I might start sounding like robots, but for a good reason, because I don't think there is any other software that takes time domain seriously. There
Yeah.
are software like socks. I've tried it, but the problem is it's not just that you don't want to just provide a tool. Hey, yeah, you can do 1 million taps in socks. But the
Hmm.
problem is doing that right is very hard. You cannot just use some windowing filter,
Yeah.
and expect good results. You kind
Yeah.
of get okay results with it. I know HQ Player also tried this with their sync
Yeah. The sync
filters.
in, sync
Yeah,
out.
I think the idea is good, but again, it's biased because UC's believes in nothing wrong with it. It's just
Hmm.
like frequency domain. Because when you have 1 million taps, where do you want the 1 million taps to work most for you? You know, it's an
Hmm.
optimization problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's like trying to spend $1 million, and you want to put your money where you think it'll provide you the best return. So in
Exactly.
that sense, you want those 1 million taps, all of the 1 million taps to work towards frequency domain performance. Yes,
Yeah.
I don't think you can beat what HQ Player does in that department for 1 million taps. No,
Yeah.
uh, I don't
That
think
makes
any
sense.
software can beat it. Nor does MScaler, and not surprising.
Hmm.
But if you want to spend that 1 million taps equally on both time domain and frequency domain, your results are going to be different, and the
Yes.
graphs are not going to look so nice.
Yeah.
But for those who believe it makes a difference, I think it's worth it. And I
Hmm.
fall into the category that when I would spend, I would put equal priority on both.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would say that I have, if it meets the minimum frequency domain constraints, I would spend the rest of my tabs on improving time domain performance.
Interesting.
That is kind of my ideology.
Yeah.
Good thing is, good thing is, with the new PGGB, I did not have to make that compromise. I surprised myself. I mean, I'm saying I just stumbled on it.
Yeah.
Experimentation. I surprised myself because I was not expecting the results, because the new algorithm staff doesn't really matter anymore.
Hmm.
I'm able
Yeah.
to achieve. In fact, the way it works is, for a given precision 64-bit, 128 or 256, I'm able to maximize both time domain and frequency domain performance, and that's it. I mean, there's no compromise here. That is why the number of choices dramatically reduced. If you
Yeah.
see, you don't have too many options anymore, because previously I needed those options,
Uh-huh.
because there was always a compromise between frequency domain and time domain. That is why we
Yeah.
had the windowing and the transparency and all that stuff. I do not have to make those compromises anymore. So there was no need for those choices, and
Well,
I'm
that
quite
makes that an
happy.
easy choice then.
Yeah, I know, because the easy choice is the perfect, right? Like you said, there's only one right answer, and if you already have the right answer, then you don't need choices.
Yeah. That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, at least subjectively to me, and all the feedback I've got, I think it's it's great. I think it is right when you hear it.
Yes.
And it's nice, mathematically. It's nice because it's very satisfying. When
Yeah.
you
And it's
have a
nice to be
solution
able
that is,
to have a reason why it sounds better, you know?
yeah, you have a reason, and it is very elegant and beautiful in how it all fell to
Hmm.
piece together, and it was at the end like, wow. It's simple, and a lot of times, I think even in physics, a lot of physicists will say the same thing. It's like, you know, when you're analyzing a complex problem, a lot of times, the simpler the solution is, the more elegant it is. It's most likely to fit better.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, think of equation like E equal to mc squared. It's very
Hmm.
simple, but it explains a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I didn't mean to digress. But
No worries. I guess
uh,
so. The next thing would be is I know on your website it talks a lot about the reconstruction accuracy of PGGB versus other softwares. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think I'll circle back to my original thing that when you're doing upsampling, you're trying to guess what the intermediate samples are, and there's only one right answer,
Mm-hmm.
right? And reconstruction accuracy is all about getting to that right answer.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we don't have access to the music that was recorded at all sample rates, so you can just go and check it.
Yeah.
And even if it were, the sampling itself is not accurate enough. Sampling clocks are not perfect.
Yeah.
It's not accurate enough. I know Robert's trying to do his I think the recording. I forget the name, Deviana, or I think where he's trying to record at a higher rate to verify it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
But in software, there are easier ways of doing it. I can
Yeah.
simulate a very complex signal and generate it perfectly generated at different sample rates.
Yeah.
Then I can take the unsample. I basically say I want to sample 16 by 16 fs. So I can create a complex signal at the base rate, which is 44 100. I can create the same signal at a higher rate, 16 fs. Now I
Mm-hmm.
can upsample the base signal and compare it with what it would have been because I have the perfect, uh,
Gotcha.
high rate signal, and that is how I quote out my reconstruction accuracy.
Wow. I didn't know about the creation of the second signal.
Yeah, and it's pretty simple to do, right? Because it's
Yeah.
software, and I can do, and that is why when in my graphs I show really small signals because it's
Uh-huh.
simulation. There's no way you can record those signals,
Yeah.
and it's like absurd and insane, really. It's
But it's an
absurd and
interesting
insane,
way of
but
like fact
but it
checking
just
yourself.
yeah. It's absurd and insane, but yet at the same time it's undeniable. I would say you hear the difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's and that's it's like as a person who's as an engineer and a scientist, it's hard to we don't have a good understanding of the brain and the
Yeah.
extent to which we don't have a good understanding of all that, and so all I know is what I hear, and all I know is it's like eating organic food.
Yeah.
It doesn't harm you, right?
No.
It might be expensive, but it doesn't harm you. You're
Of
not doing
course.
anything wrong. So it satisfies me that hey, I am trying to increase the reconstruction accuracy. I'm not harming anything,
Uh-uh.
right? There's no harm done, and I think I hear a difference. I mean, I hear a difference. I don't think I think, but so really, I'm not trying to make things worse and trying to say it's better or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, but reconstruction accuracy is basically that, trying to get to the actual values as good
Mm-hmm.
as better we can. And I would say at high, the values I provided on website are really after noise shaping. If you
Yeah.
took out the noise shaping, it's like there is no difference. Really, the difference is zero. I mean,
Yeah.
I say zero, but really within the error for the precision,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're going to compute at 64 bits, there's going to be an error. It
Yeah.
is within that tolerance of the precision itself. So basically, unmeasurable at that
Yeah.
point.
That makes
So
sense.
that is why it's close to ideal. Is why I put that because it is close to ideal and
Yeah.
is doable. So
And we've heard it too. I mean, the new 256, I think it's called the Extreme one now, sounds fantastic. I mean, we've had to redo our whole libraries and everything else, but it's been fun.
yeah, I'm I'm tired of redoing my library, but I do.
Yeah.
The worst part is I stop listening to music because I have something better and I want to hear
Yeah.
that.
Exactly. But it's
So
it's it's fun in the process.
yeah,
Uh, so one of the other things I wanted to touch on was the implementation of low pass filters. So there's always kind of different manufacturers, and even sometimes the DACs will let you switch internally between minimum phase and linear phase. So I know you've gone with ultra long linear phase filters. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and why that makes sense for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it comes back to time domain
Hmm.
again. Linear phase filters basically allow all frequencies to pass through without any change to their phase or timing. So, like if your current shot passes through, it has to come back
Hmm.
together. If it's spaced over time, it becomes noise.
Yeah.
Or if you get noise and it squeezes them all together, then you start making it sharper,
Hmm.
right? You don't want, so basically linear phase would not allow any, by definition, would not allow any phase distortions.
Yeah.
It will keep the original um, relative timing between different frequencies.
Hmm.
uh, when so from a reconstruction perspective, right, if you don't preserve the shape, you're basically breaking the first rule.
Yes.
There's no way you're going to piece it together.
Uh-uh.
So linear phase makes perfect sense from a time domain perspective. Minimum phase filters have their part. Minimum phase filters are, I mean, without getting into too much math of it, they try to concentrate the energy near the beginning of a transient.
Hmm.
They, by definition, they minimize the group delay. Minimize the delay.
Yeah.
Kind of trying to bunch frequencies together. And a lot of times you would hear people say, "Hey, with minimum phases, you hear better attack or dynamics
Yeah.
compared to linear phase." But linear phase would sound the imaging would be better and sound a little more accurate in
Hmm.
depth. uh, it all makes sense, mostly. But I would say between the two, the more accurate one is linear
Linear
phase.
phase. Yeah.
With some, we have to, again. There is always this. Hey, if you had 1 million taps, where will you spend the taps? But the
Yeah.
problem for DAC manufacturers is they don't have 1 million taps. They have 100, 120,
Yeah.
128. Now that becomes a problem because to get the same frequency domain performance with linear phase filters, you need twice as many taps as you would need with minimum phase.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
and so for really short filters, I would be happy with minimum phase because there reaches a point where my frequency domain performance becomes more important.
Yeah.
Not
That
just
makes sense.
measurement perspective, but from an anti-aliasing perspective, cutting off those images
Yeah.
and reducing noise and so on. So nothing wrong with minimum phase.
Hmm.
But if you really have a lot of resources, I would say linear phase is almost a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I would not spend any time on minimum phase filters. Uh, if resource is the constraint, like for example, you want to upsample to 1024 DSD, then things start adding up. And so there you have to make a choice. If I choose a linear phase, I'm going to only get half the performance. So you choose what is needed.
Hmm.
So but from a time domain perspective, when you have infinite resources, linear phase is the way to go. I want to add that PGGB no longer uses explicit filters like that,
Yep.
but from a
That was the next
mathematically,
question.
yeah, mathematical perspective, for it is equivalent to a perfect linear phase filter. Let's just
Hmm.
say
Yeah.
perfect sync filter. Let's just say, like, that's the best way I can put it. So it is linear phase,
Yeah.
mathematical. Linear phase in the sense that it does not change the phase or introduce phase distortions.
Yeah. And so I, it's called, I forget the name. It's sync. You called it
Yeah,
sync
yeah, sync.
windowed filters. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah. It's
saying
sign. Yeah,
it's
Windows
essentially
sync.
linear phase.
Yeah, yeah, because it's a sinusoid divided by sine of x divided by x, and it's symmetric. Linear
Hmm.
phases have to be symmetric.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it is.
Gotcha.
And they and I know the name pre-ringing is used. They are linear phases are symmetric and also non-causal. Which means they have, before the peak there is some ringing, and after the peak there's ringing.
Yeah.
I mean, visually, we'll come to the ringing later, but visually they will have activity before and after. Minimum phase, you have a peak and then you'll see it die down.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you typically at minimum phase filter looks like.
Yeah, and there's, they've started to introduce tons of different filters on especially kind of the, lower tier of DACs to play around with, but like
Yeah, and I
linear,
think
minimum
yeah,
phase, apodizing, hybrid. I mean, it's
yeah.
interesting.
Well, I think some filters work well, especially if you have you want to choose a filter that's less damaging if you're using an upsampler. So from
Mhm.
that perspective, some of those filter choices are helpful. Other than that, it's just a compromise between frequency and time, domain performance, and
Yeah.
and also people like choices.
Yeah, of course. Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
Uh,
and I want to say that it's not like the DAC manufacturers are providing all these choices. It's the DAC chip manufacturers.
mhm.
ESS and AKM, it's not, these already have all those filters built in,
Yeah.
and the manufacturers are just exposing those controls. Some
Ex
do add their own custom filters, not many,
mhm.
but you can do that too. Yes.
Another thing to talk about, I guess, just the upsampling process is the reduction of quantization noise. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what quantization noise is and how it is affecting the audible band.
Yeah. So quantization noise is like like I said, we start with digital sampling, right? You take a snapshot. You have and you don't have infinite space to store all of that. So you basically allocate, hey, I have to fit each sound level within. Digital is all about, uh, when you're saying 8-bit or 16-bit, what it means is, you're talking about I can take a value and I can evenly divide the maximum value by 2 to 6, or in terms of 8. I'll keep it simple. 8 bits is easy. 8 bits
Hmm.
is 2 power 8. It's just 2 to 6. So
Yeah.
that means if you have a value between 0 and 1, you can have, if 1 being the peak, sorry, -1 and +1.
Hmm.
Let's not even forget -1. Let's just keep it simple. 0 and 1. 0 will be your 0, and 2 to 6 will be your 1.
Yeah.
So you can split it in equally into 2 to 6 pieces. Now the problem
Gotcha.
is analog world is not like that, right? You have
Hmm.
infinite of the
Yeah.
infinite bits in between, infinite ways you can. Uh, so quantize, to quantize means basically take an analog quantity and try to fit it in digital format, which effectively means you have to make an approximation, because if you had 0.333, it won't fit in anything. So you'll
Hmm.
approximate to 0.25.
Yeah.
So you basically have to fit it in a bin. You have 2 to 6 bins. You have to place it in one of the bins, and so when you're doing that, you are introducing an error,
Yeah.
and that error is the quantization noise.
Gotcha.
But from that is you know that is the process of just storing it. But let's assume you have a CD, it's already stored. Now what does that mean for upsampling process,
Hmm.
right? So during upsampling, most of these softwares are operating at a higher bit depth, like 64 bits,
Yeah.
because a computer works at 64 bits. That's a very big number. 2 to the power of 64 bins, it's a very big number. Okay, so you take the CD format, which is 16 bits typically, so it's 2 power 16 pins. But that is in case of PGGB, I don't talk about this much, but PGGB pretty much retains your original samples. It doesn't change your original samples. Because that was the original snapshot, right?
Yeah.
That is true. That is as true as it gets.
Hmm.
So now then PGGB introduces the intermediate samples. And these intermediate samples are computed at a very high accuracy, like 2 to 6 bits, 64 or 128 bits, right?
Hmm.
That means you have a lot more bins to store those intermediate values.
Yeah.
But when you play back music, you cannot store music in 64 bits. I mean, you can store in 64-bit, but there's no DAC that can play 64-bit format.
Yeah.
Typical formats are 16, 24, or 32.
Yeah.
Now you have to take this intermediate values which you have computed at a very high precision, like 2 to 6 bits,
Hmm.
and put it back into something smaller or lesser number of bins.
Yeah.
right? So then you introduce an error, and that error is the quantization noise
Yeah.
because it's not true. That is why it's noise. Because you have 0.33 and now you're making it 0.25,
Uh-huh.
and the difference is the noise. And visually, the way to look at this is you might have seen kind of pixelated or digital video, right? Old DVDs.
Yeah.
You see how they're a lot of times they're predictable.
Uh-huh.
In the sense that I mean, visually they are blocky. It's not real because they're not
Yeah.
smooth.
Yeah.
That is kind of what quantization noise does it because it's very predictable.
Yeah.
And so when you the reason I'm saying is if you have a value 0.33, it will always be stored as 0.25. It's very predictable. It's correlated,
Yeah.
and your eyes pick up visually. The eyes pick up on those patterns.
Uh-huh.
Same thing with your ears and brain. It picks up on those patterns, and visually those look like high frequencies, right? Edgy,
Yeah.
blocky when you see quant. That is what digital noise or a quantization noise sounds like in a way. It's high frequency distortion,
Mm-hmm.
kind of edgy and harsh.
Yeah.
So that is what that's basically what how quantization noise is introduced. Whenever you do any kind of processing of a digital signal and you try to put it back into digital format, you are going to get quantization noise.
And that's even true of PGGB, right?
Yeah, it's true of everything. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
PGGB handles it in different way. Yeah, and I think that's your next question.
Yes. So that was the difference between dither and noise shaping, and then how is noise shaping implemented in
Yeah.
PGGB?
So dither basically, dither is nice. That's it's been done for a long time and
Mm-hmm.
quite effective. Visually, you can say this. Dithered images look a little better than quantized images. They look a little smooth, like Gaussian,
Yeah.
noise artificially added to images. They kind of make it look a little nicer. Less harsh on your eyes. Dither, what it does is, hey, I'm not every time if I'm going to predictably move 0.33 into 0.25, I'm going to add some randomness there. Sometimes I'm going to make it 0.3, and sometimes I'm going to make it 0.25.
Okay.
That is dither. Basically, add some
Mm-hmm.
randomness and less predictability. And
Yeah.
what that happens is, it's kind of it's a nice white noise in the background that kind of smooths things out
Yeah.
and hides the hard edges. It basically what it's doing is decorrelates the noise, and and the
By
process. If you don't do any of this, it's called truncation. Really, you're
yeah, there you
getting
go.
it. Now you're just basically trying to smooth out that by decorrelating the truncation
Mm-hmm.
noise and making it sound a little nicer.
Yeah.
That's what dither does. Now, what dither? That's a good thing about the dither. Bad thing about dither is it uniformly does it. It doesn't care whether it's audible or outside audible range. It just
Yeah.
does it to everything.
Uh-huh.
So, noise shaping is not a new concept. Noise shaping has been around in DAX for a long time. Different kind of noise shaping, but noise shaping, the idea of noise shaping is used in DAX, and that is why that is basically the fundamental requirements for one of the fundamental needs for delta sigma or part of delta sigma DAX.
Yeah.
And also DSDs. DSD is all about noise shaping. So
Mm-hmm.
what noise shaping is kind of like an EQ on the noise, quantization noise. So hey, instead of having this noise uniformly, dither noise uniformly available throughout the whole range, what if I reduce the noise? I mean, I don't want any noise if if at all possible in my audible range, in places where I can hear.
Yeah.
Let me just push that all out into a higher frequency.
Yeah.
That is what noise shaping does.
Uh-huh.
Noise shaping is literally what it is. It says noise shaping. It's like EQing the noise to where you push it out. Again, intelligent math, bright engineers, not me. I didn't develop it, but it's all done before. I'm just a person who uses those things.
Mm-hmm.
But you noise shape. You basically EQ the noise kind of and push it out in areas where it's less important.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's an advanced, form of dithering. You know, and you know, so that means, I mean, you can take the noise shaping to an extreme where there's almost no noise in the audible range. And
Yeah.
again, it's again similar to how I was talking about frequency domain and time domain bias. If you had $1 million,
Yeah.
you can put it in different places. Same thing with noise shaping. You can put the noise in different places. And that is kind of what is unique about PGGB. How PGGB implements noise shaping. It's not the typical ones you would find in most softwares. One of the things is, I mean, if I provided the specifications and the coefficients I use for noise shapers, most DSP engineers would think I'm insane. Uh, it's just insane, really.
Yeah.
Some of the noise shapers I use is 40th order noise shapers.
Oh
The
wow.
trouble with designing these noise shapers, the higher the order is, it's extremely unstable if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And but well, like I said, I have methods of, it's very stable, not just very stable, but also very accurate. And I think I post a lot about this on my webpage. The After noise shaping, uh, you know, um, the original uh, signal in the audible range is preserved. I mean, it's almost as good as no noise shaping was done.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm able to confidently say that is because I'm able to compare noise shaped signal with the original. Remember the one I said I can simulate and
Yeah.
compare the difference, and the difference was not as good as mu, but it's pretty close. Like some really small number, like 10 to the power of minus 35 dB. Some
That's
just
insane.
just 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 really small. And that is at a 300, minus 301 dB. Even at minus 600 dB signal, if you put it in, I'm still at 0.00001 dB accuracy.
Yeah.
So really, even small, very, very small signals get through the noise shapers without any phase or amplitude distortion. Basically, what that means is the shape is preserved. Nothing happens to it. Um, that I think is pretty unique about PGGB in software. I know uh, Cordax does it, but but being a DAC and resource constraint, not a 2 physics bit precision. So
Hmm.
the 2 physics bit precision, allows me to do a lot more. Even at 64-bit, I can easily get 10 to the power of minus 5 dB accuracy, even at 64-bit.
Yeah.
At 300, even for a signal as small as minus 301 dB. And again, these are insanely small numbers, and I know, I'm pretty sure I get and others get ridiculed for even saying those things. But really, what it means is, I'm not trying to say, hey, you need 3 - 3101 dB
Uh-huh.
or any such thing. I'm saying, the noise shapers and the methods we use are accurate. It's not doing any
Exactly.
harm.
Yeah.
It's like the processing never happened.
Uh-huh.
You just magically inserted those samples, and we are not doing any harm. So,
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I um, look at it. One more thing unique about the PGB noise shapers is, I'm able to control where I want the noise to go. That is why recently I started, because I got some feedback on subjectively on some tracks, like old tracks. There was some advantage of not perfectly reconstructing, because
Interesting.
audio is not all audio is recorded equally, and some
Yes.
when you're reconstructing, you just hope all of that is just music.
Hmm.
If you have the old recordings, like, or high, low dynamic range music, or like, your favorite classic rock,
Yeah.
they can have a lot of artificial distortions or even recording issues. And when you try to reconstruct those perfectly, you're also trying to reconstruct the noise in the because because the algorithm doesn't know what is noise
Yeah.
in the audible range
Uh-huh.
and not. And when you try to reconstruct those, it may not sound very pleasing at times. It might sound too hi-fi. I don't know what. It just depends. It might just
Interesting.
not.
Yeah.
Sometimes same reason why some people want to use tubes. Nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying you
Yeah.
want you want some of this music. You don't want that. Just like dither helps. Like sometimes you
Yeah.
don't want perfect. Sometimes you want like, okay, let's just make
Keep
it a
some
little
of the
imperfect
distortion.
because
Yeah.
yeah, because especially what happens is this high frequency with the noise present and reconstructed can introduce harshness. I
Yeah.
mean, PGB is just doing its job. It's just trying to reconstruct everything, but it doesn't know some of it is noise. And
Yeah.
so for that reason, recently I started providing more than one option
Hmm.
for noise shaping, and I do encourage folks to say whenever you feel like an old recording or a transfer does not sounds a little too harsh, try the alternate or the extended option and see one of those would fit. One more thing to try definitely is I think is one of the questions is try the HF filters, the aggressive one.
Yeah.
You would be surprised. Sometimes it might be beneficial based on
That's interesting to
what
hear
you're
about
using.
the old recordings as well.
Yeah, and that is why, and that's why I said it's unique to PGB because I have a way to shape the noise where I can say, hey, I want the least noise in the audible range, or I can say the maximum noise out of band needs to be this, or sometimes some analog equipment are more sensitive or have an extended band, 50 kilohertz or 100 kilohertz. Some of the amplifiers are preamps, and they may be
Yeah.
sensitive to some of noise in within that range, and that's where the different noise shapers help. And I would say before anyone says, "Hey, we cannot hear anything beyond 20 kilohertz," of course we don't hear anything beyond 20 kilohertz. Then why should it matter where the noise is? Well,
Yeah.
I think we hear a difference, and not because we hear beyond 20 kilohertz. No one hears it. I think it does affect the analog electronics in some way. The noise energy needs to be dissipated somehow, and when you are band limited to 100 or whatever, it can start to increase the noise floor of the analog equipment itself, and
Interesting.
and it,
Yeah.
and that manifests as some sort of harshness. So it is not that you are hearing beyond 20 kilohertz. I don't hear beyond 15 kilohertz. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So it's just that it is just modulating the noise floor, and it
Yeah.
comes out in different ways.
That's interesting.
And it, yeah,
I guess another thing to touch on similar in that when you were talking about the options is the high frequency noise filters. And
yeah,
I guess that answers one of my questions about, you know, who would use this or why would you need to use this
yeah,
differently?
yeah, yeah. So one thing I would say is a format that is notorious for high frequency noise that can actually damage your equipment is DSD.
Mm,
As a part of any DSD conversion, there has to be a low pass uh, filter, and basically you want to cut off all the high frequency noise. DSD has a lot of noise beyond
yeah.
30 kilohertz. Most you will be surprised that a lot of high resolution content, high res music would have noise too after 40 kilohertz. The reason is that's just a part of conversion, analog to digital conversion,
Hmm.
and as part of the ADCs, uh, there's music, and then they also noise shape, and
Yeah.
as a result of the noise shaping, they are going to add some high frequency noise.
Yeah.
So and that's why you have tools like RASA to let you see what your music has. Where does the music stop? Where does the noise begin?
Yeah.
That's why I have that free tool. And part of it is I'm also interested. I take one. I normally take one track per album of some of the recordings I suspect, and see where the music stops and where I think the noise begins.
Yeah.
It takes time. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
train yourself and all that. But lot of times, high-res music has noise, sometimes even beyond 220 kilohertz. A lot
Oh
of times
wow.
beyond 40 kilohertz. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is not all music, I can tell you that.
Uh-huh.
So it's just ADC noise. It's just noise shaped. Just
Yeah.
the same thing. Quantization noise that's been noise shaped and it's there. And so there's no point in reconstructing that, right?
Yeah.
The default settings, the automatic settings are there for a reason because on most good recordings, those are good options.
Yeah.
Especially if you go beyond 96 kilohertz. 96 kilohertz doesn't need much of that because it already stops at 48 kilohertz. Any it's just called a Nyquist frequency. So
Yeah.
any recording, you start the music actually stops at half the rate.
Yeah.
So for 96 kilohertz or 88, you already have stopping at 44 or 48. They
Yeah.
don't need much of a filtering. But anything beyond that, 192 or 176 kilohertz, you are
Mhm.
going to start seeing noise beyond 44 or 40. And
Yeah.
and and sometimes it's just better to filter, and that's why by default I use the minimal filtering that just cuts it off at 48.
That
You
makes
have an
sense.
option to turn it off, and you can
Yeah.
hear the difference.
Mhm.
It just sounds more natural with the filter on, and the filter is another thing unique about PGB is it's just completely transparent. It's like there's no filter. You
Yeah.
would not hear any. You'll only you know either you don't hear a difference or you hear an improvement, but you won't see any negative effects of the filter.
Yeah.
So it is safe to use, and that is why the filters are there because we don't want to perfectly reconstruct ADC noise because it doesn't sound nice.
Yeah. And there's no need to.
Yeah, there's no need to. Yeah, really. And I think it just affects by reconstructing the noise, you're just reducing the accuracy is kind of what it is.
Mhm.
Because it was not it was not a part of the original snapshot, right?
Yeah.
It was added by the ADC process after the fact. So you don't want to reconstruct that.
Yeah. So I guess going off the high frequency noise from DSD is I know that you chose to not include upsampling to DSD. And so to talk about some of the how you view DSD, either like potential benefits or challenges, and why you chose not to include it as an option.
Yeah, the answer is of course going to be different depending on
Hmm.
who you ask.
Yeah.
But you ask me, so I can tell you what I feel.
Yes.
The promise of DSD was that it's a format where you can go from recording to playback without any processing. That was the promise of DSD and
Yeah.
SAC. But it's a promise that was never delivered. Really, it's
Yeah.
far away from the truth for many reasons. Personally, I feel single. I had to be clear, single bit DSD. And that is the only DSD that's available. Even though you can have multi-bit, it is not a standard format, so you don't see it.
Yeah.
Single bit DSD is, according to me, just fundamentally flawed because I mean, it's like when I talked about noise shapers, right? You're trying to squeeze 62, 32, or whatever bits into, 64 bits into 32 bits or 24. In DSD, literally what you're doing is trying to squeeze 16 bits, 32 bits, or whatever, 64 bits of information into one bit.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot of quantization noise to
Yes.
deal with. And it's extremely hard to deal with that levels of quantization noise, especially if you're talking about an ADC that just dumps or records in DSD. It
Yeah.
doesn't have all the power of great modulators like HQ player has. It doesn't have that kind of power to do all that. So it just makes do with whatever um, modulator it can fit. And for that very reason, you are handicapping it right at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
As a format, you write, it's already you're starting at a disadvantage.
Mhm.
And also other problem with DSD where the promise is you can take from going from recording to playback easily. It's never true. No one records and just delivers.
Yeah.
Very 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 few, right? It has to go through a mastering process. It has to go through a mixing process.
Hmm.
It's just too naive to think DST just comes out and gets done SAC.
Straight from the
Uh,
artist to you.
yeah, no. And now DSD is a very hard format to do anything with. You can do simple things, maybe like increase the gain or something. But anything beyond mixing and EQ, no, forget about it. So
Yeah.
what you are not told as a consumer a lot of times is your DSD recording is that was originally recorded at DSD was actually went through multiple conversion processes. It went
Yeah.
from DSD to a PCM because that's what most DAWs work with, then
Yeah.
back to DSD.
Hmm. And even
And
within DAWs, it's hard to work in high bit PCM.
yeah, and sometimes it's 32-bit. And then it might be disturbed, who knows what, and then back to DSD.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I've got really good albums even. It might even go through an analog stage because they find digital mixing is not that great. So it would just go through analog mixing, then back to digital.
Yeah.
All kinds of crazy stuff. But
Yeah.
that's again another issue with DSD.
Hmm.
Just because it's very hard to handle.
Yeah.
Then another issue with DSD is okay. Say finally the DSD was delivered to your playback. Now the way DSDs work, the noise shaping works is basically you have to it's you have to distribute the noise, quantization noise over a long window because it's just one bit. That
Yeah.
means you have to look at a long window to reconstruct it.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of times, transient reset construction really suffers. And in DSD, some people like it, nothing wrong. It's just some people like it because DSD is just a little warmer sounding, a little soft sounding, and it might suit their system better. So there is a reason for DSDs, in that
Yeah.
sense, if you like the sound. But really, even with DSD DACs, modern DSD DACs, right? Single bit DSD is rarely used
Yeah.
within. A lot of times you send in a single bit DSD, it internally changes it to PCM, which again breaks the whole promise of DSD.
Yeah.
There are some cases where there might be some DACs do provide a um, single bit path, DSD path,
Yeah.
you know, but the very same DAC will also provide you with other options like PCM.
Uh-huh.
So, I would not go for a, flat out and say, hey, just because my DAC has a single bit DSD, it would sound better.
Yeah.
DSD would sound better. And that is like, I know there's a lot of misinformation about it that, a DSD DAC would only do DSD best. No,
Mhm.
that's all true if you do not have good enough PCM upsampling.
Yeah.
In the absence of good enough PCM upsampling, those might be true. If there is a good PCM upsampler, it is worth trying both. You know, uh,
And I
but
guess there are ones also that operate internally with DSD. So even if you feed it, high bit PCM, it's then being converted to high bit DSD.
yeah, yes, and in fact, even card DACs do it.
Yeah.
Card is not considered a DSD DAC, but you have to be a little careful there. It is
Hmm.
part of the digital to analog conversion process. You go to a lot of times PCM, then a high rate PCM is gone to slightly lower bit depth, digital SDM.
Yeah.
It's not true DS. When we say DSD, I'm talking about single bit DSD. Most of these
Hmm.
DACs are doing multi-bit
Yeah.
DSD. So it's not the same,
Yeah.
but almost most of these DACs go, delta sigma delta DACs do that. Nothing wrong with it. The
Hmm.
problem is the single bit DSD format that is too restrictive. Like you can do really great things if you have a five bit, you know, DSD, delta sigma conversion process. If you had multi-bit, you can do a lot more,
Yeah.
and you can get a lot less noise. And even there, like in the for example, card DACs, they go through this first step. The most work is done in the 16 FS conversion. The next step, things simplify a bit because that is the most important step. The 16 or 32 FS.
Yeah.
After that, you can make things a little simpler because the next step would be use a simpler filters. Then they might just do a linear interpolation, and
Hmm.
then they might just do what's called a zero order whole. Just keep the same, repeat the same samples, and then because DSD, like I said, because it's reduced bits and the more quantization noise, it needs more space to push out those noise.
Yeah.
That's the reason why DSDs always need to be at a very high rate.
Yeah.
64-bit DSD are really no good. If you really want to do anything good with DSD, it has to hit 256 bits. Sorry, 256 DSD 256 or higher rates.
Hmm.
And getting there means it's still upsampling.
Yeah.
You still, the better upsampling you do, the better results you get. But still, at the end, you are restricted by the 1-bit DSD is the best it can do.
That makes
And
sense.
that is the real reason why. I mean, I tried. I I tried. I have tried DSD modulators. The reason
Uh-huh.
I have DSD. I mean, I have modulator, but I don't want to introduce
Yeah.
that mainly because it just does not come anywhere close to the accuracy I can get in with PCM. It just does
Yeah.
not come
That makes
anywhere.
sense.
What I did, there's a reason why PGB does 64 allows you to do 64FS.
Yeah.
64FS in 32-bit format instead of single-bit format because single-bit 64FS is really your DSD 64.
Yeah.
So instead, what I do is I provide the option of 64FS in 32 bits or 24 bits or whatever,
Yeah.
or you can save it in 64FS in double format. The
Hmm.
reason there is then you can go to your favorite modulator and do the conversion because then you're feeding in the best quality PCM. And,
Exactly.
and then use a modulator of your choice because I don't want to do something that's already been done really because
Gotcha.
again I say HQ player has great modulators.
Yeah.
I tried. I don't think I can. I come close, but I don't think I can beat it, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do something that I cannot be better at.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, I think that's a long way of answering why PGGB doesn't really have a
Yeah.
modulator.
I think it's I guess always interesting because there's kind of this thought that DSD is like a more perfect recording versus PCM traditionally. But I don't think that idea includes kind of the nature of upsampling and also the ideas you talked about how it's not necessarily you know the true DSD that people think that they're getting.
Yeah, you'll be surprised what happens before it becomes DSD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I guess so. Moving off of that is there's DAX from the Meitner Audio Company and Playback Design, which I've read through some of their manuals, and some of the things that they claim is that they think it's easier to convert higher rate DSD to analog waveform, and I think that goes back to kind of what you were saying along the lines of that was the original idea of DSD, was to make the processing easier.
Yeah, as a let's say if you want less work as a DAC manufacturer, yeah,
Uh-huh.
sure,
Yeah.
right? Because someone else has already done the work. Give me 1024 DSD. All I have to do is put a simple analog filter, FAR filter, and then done, bang. Because all you
Yeah.
do is just filter it and get it out. And in fact, that's already been done. Like in R2R DACs, like Pain, they have single bit path. It's very simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just feed it. It performs well when you feed it really high rate
Gotcha.
DSD.
Uh-huh.
Yes, so I cannot deny any of that, but that doesn't necessarily claim. I mean, yes, it makes it easier. Doesn't really mean it's better than PCM,
Yeah.
right? I know there are like even on a MADAC, if you feed it really good high rate, noise shaped, upsampled PCM, it would. I mean, of course, there's preference and everything. At least to my
Yeah.
ears, it beats DSD done with your
Hmm.
favorite upsampling software.
Yeah.
So it's still there's subjectivity involved. So I cannot just say one is which is true or this or that because there's a tag in between,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And
So if someone measures it and lets me know, yeah, sure. But
I guess
but I cannot make a blanket statement like
Yeah.
yes, PCM will be better or
And I guess that takes us to a kind of a next question that I'm sure a lot of people ask is which decks are going to benefit most from this software or from upsampling in general?
yeah. I mean, there's always a subjective element, because what is more accurate may not be what you want.
Yeah.
So, of course, anything I say needs to be taken with a grain of salt.
Hmm.
But I would say that in the purest form, in terms of not messing with the signal, R2R DACs that operate at a high rate, 16 fs or more, where you can enable the NOS mode, and I don't want to get hung up on true NOS versus probably a
Yeah.
linear.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there are I know I've seen a few where NOS not true NOS. I won't worry too much about it. A zero
Uh-huh.
hour hold or a linear is good enough for me.
Yeah.
But main thing is they won't filter or any complicated upsampling in there.
Yeah.
So one main thing with R2R DAC is of course resistor matching is always an issue with R2R DACs. So even with all the methods they use, even the best measuring R2R DACs cannot be linear more than 20 bits. So that is where the noise shaping helps.
Hmm.
If you noise shape, basically you are only effectively using the DAX 20 bits.
Yeah.
And zeroing effect it's just zeroing out the last few bits. And what that does is really you takes the non-linearity in your DAC out auto our DAC and makes it perform really well in that sense. And whatever accuracy you can squeeze in within the night shaper, you benefit from. So in that sense, R2R DACs are really with a high rate and NOS mode are really a good fit for
Uh-huh.
PGB upsampling. Then again, that doesn't mean R2R all any R2R DAC is going to beat any other Delta Sigma DAC. No,
Oh
it
yeah.
is
Yeah.
there's a lot
It's
more to the DAC than the digital. That's the
yeah.
digital aspect of it, right? There's a lot more
Hmm.
like the analog front end, how's the
Hmm.
handling of the USB, the noise, and
And
or
that's what it is, just from a digital front end
yeah,
perspective.
from a digital perspective, yes. Then there are many Delta Sigma DACs that have an option to disable the oversampling filters,
Yeah.
or uh, or they provide a kind of pseudo NOS mode where the filter is really
Yeah.
benign, or I think some RME even has something that looks very close to a zero order hold. So, but I've not heard RME benefiting too much from a PGB. Maybe someone can
Yeah.
help me there. But I like some there are the Gustav DAC. There are some DACs that really do well with PGGB, and good bang for the money in that sense. Where you have a Delta Sigma DAC and you can disable the oversampling filter,
Uh-huh.
they work really well. Then there are some DACs such as the card DACs, which we know work really well with PGGB, mainly because they are kind of designed to play with the same principles.
Yeah.
And so everything behind, and it automatically disables the oversampling in the first stage, and then everything behind it is done carefully. So they
Gotcha.
benefit too. Interestingly, the card decks are not alone there. I've heard really good things about MSB decks,
Hmm.
the select MSB, where they too disable with the new Pro ISL USB.
Yeah.
Um, they too disable the internal upsampling, and it's apparently sounds really really good.
Well,
Even
I know we talked about it with the super high sample rate because you've got some things that can go up to around like 3 megahertz.
yeah, no one has tried that yet. I know the digital director, MSB's new digital director, is capable of doing it. I don't know whether anyone has tried it. Part of the issue is there's not a lot of well, I guess his HQ player supports that, right? Maybe I'm not sure. Rune doesn't.
Yeah. No, I think Rune's
So
only 768.
yeah. So I think HQ player supports that, right? So part of the issue is, there's not a whole lot of software out there, players that would let you do
Yeah.
play at that rate. And of course, someone has to. be brave enough to want to have massive
Exactly.
files and play it back, but it's worth it, you know.
Uh-huh.
And then there's also the, like I said, talk about this something is magical about 16 or 32 fps, where
Yeah.
there's definitely some diminishing returns. Yeah, you can go more, but maybe you may not benefit much.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've not heard it at that rate. So, it's certainly something you should look at. I know there's also even the DCS Vivaldi, with the new Apex modules.
Mhm.
Even though it's only 8 FS, I believe, there's, I mean, I was amazed when I heard, heard heard it back to back with my own favorite deck, which is the Vinny Rossi I have an L2 deck. When
Mhm.
I heard back to back, I was surprised because the Vinny Rossi we were playing at 16 FS, and then we went to DCS Vivaldi at 8 FS, and the Vivaldi still sounded better. it
Interesting.
Yeah, and it did benefit from the upsampling. I was quite surprised, for an 8 FS deck, and I believe part of it is it just well, everything after that probably disables any upsampling and probably does whatever it does.
Yeah.
But it did seem to benefit, and I was quite surprised. The reason I bring this all up is I think there's some misconception that PGGB is only good with card decks or NOS decks. That's not really true.
Yeah.
A lot of Delta Sigma decks can benefit too if if you're able to do some simple things.
Uh-huh.
But at lower rates, I would not bother. Below 8 FS, not many DACs can. They're most likely doing a whole lot of processing,
Yeah.
and they may not benefit. Again, interestingly, I was involved with the DIY audio, and a lot of them are really interested in lower rates, really. And apparently, one thing that came out of that set of experiments is PGGB was not doing any damage compared
Yeah.
to any other upsampling
Gotcha.
format. So it's like it was at least as good as NOS.
Yeah.
So I took that as a compliment. So that's fine.
So, and I guess this is another thing that goes off that is a lot of these DACs that have like the DS DACs that require internal upsampling, essentially. Um, do you think that can be improved upon, or do you think they're, I guess, as we were kind of investigating and digging deeper into PC hardware that can do the upsampling, do you think that there would be a push for DS DACs to offload some of this to a computer instead of trying to do internal upsampling?
I think bottom line is you want a DAC that you can plug in and listen, right?
Yeah.
And it does a decent job. At that level, yes, I think they should have a there's no excuse for not having a good implementation.
Yeah.
But of course there's given where you'll spend your $1 million kind of a deal here.
Yeah.
You can say that you want a basic good implementation, but put more your money on the analog front end
Uh-huh.
and the and everything around the digital aspect, and have a decent digital implementation. Have a digital implementation that gets out of the way when
Yeah.
needed.
Exactly.
In that, if you can do that, that'll be my dream tag.
Yeah.
I know, I think, I know I mean, some decks are already doing that, but more focus on the analog front end and things like that. And a
Hmm.
lot of DAC manufacturers are recognizing even the expensive. I know TNA DAC, they recognize that their DACs are being used for by upsamplers, both PGB and HT player,
Hmm.
and they provide a single bit DST path. They also provide an NOS PCM
Oh, interesting.
path. Yeah, PCM path, and I think it was confirmed on audiophile styles that
Mm.
I think it's the DAC 200, the one they recently released TNA,
Yeah.
um, and even the Delta Sigma, the second stage after PCM, is just doing a zero order hold,
Yeah.
not doing any. So so that manufacturers are, even like I said, it's even the good manufacturers are um, recognizing that their customers are using upsamples. Interestingly, even MSP had got touch with me because some of their I mean, just to make sure their DAC works with PGGB upsample file, because I think there's not a whole lot of source for high rate. Even if your DAC can do 768 or more, there's not a lot of source for good quality high rate PCM
Uh-huh.
music.
Yeah.
So just for making sure their customers are happy, they did reach out to me to see whether they can try a few tracks. So it's
That's
interesting that
interesting.
manufacturers are
Yeah,
recognizing that's upsampling is real, but
exactly.
I think it's not for everybody, right? You really need to be a little. I mean, not everyone wants to be upsampling.
Hmm.
It involves effort and some level of tech savviness and
Yeah.
handholding. So maybe the future is a nice box that can do all that.
Yeah. And
Plug in this.
that was one of Peter's questions is, do you think that there will be, I guess, hardware or something that we can integrate into a system that will be able to do PGG processing live?
Yeah, the live one, not with this level of fidelity, getting to live may happen. Maybe it will happen in a century. I don't know. When the hardware PC hardware catches up, with
Yeah.
what we can do. Yes, I think it can be done in real time. For
Hmm.
now, I can confidently say that it's possible to do that in real time, 64 at 64-bit accuracy. I
Yeah.
would, with the new PGGB and some more improvements I'm doing, we may be able to do 128 with
Uh-huh.
beefy, one of those monster PCs, super cool ones that you use for 1024 DSDs, but
Yeah.
not the graphic card aspect, but but nice big CPU and all that. But of course, you have to weigh it against noise that might be generated doing all that too, and isolation, make sure and do all the right things around it. So yes, my main focus is trying to see whether we can get this to streaming audio, right? So something like a plugin. We already have a foobar. Uh, I want to just say that we are working on a new version of foobar with a new PGGB,
Mm.
but yeah, for foobar.
Yeah.
Cuba now has 64 bits, makes things easy. I'm really excited about that. I don't want to reveal everything,
Yeah.
but people will be happy to see it. So that will support 64-bit, everything that PGB does right now, uh, except it won't let you convert and store files. It will let you play back.
Gotcha.
That is, I look at that as a prototype, or proof of concept, in the sense that, one, if I can do that and people are happy listening to it,
Uh-huh.
then it can be moved to a plugin,
Yeah.
maybe Arderwana, or JRiver, and because once you get into a VST or AU plugin, then it can be put in anywhere you want,
Yeah. I think
and
that would
then
be really interesting.
yeah, I think it's possible to do it. Just again, my time is limited, so it's just need finding the right partner and investment and so on. But
Yeah.
yeah, so fortunately, I'm working with Dan of AudioWise.
Oh, nice.
AudioWise licenses. Yeah, AudioWise
Uh-huh.
licenses PGGB. It licensed previously, and he's also helping with getting the word out, going to shows and things I cannot do personally. Uh, so he helps with that. But yeah,
Nice.
the idea is that, and also another thinking, another idea would be for offline upsampling, turnkey music server kind of solution where it can scan automatically for music, upsampling it when you're sleeping, and then playing it. Bam! Next day you wake up and you have some
Oh,
freshly baked music,
that
and
would
then you just
be
start playing. So you can
that
have
would
a
be the
high
best.
quality. You can have a high quality server,
Yeah.
basically doing your upsampling when it's idling and when you're not playing music.
Yeah,
and then having it ready. So that's definitely a possibility. We are already in talks with someone
that would be
for those.
great.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at. Well, no, but again, I wish I had 48-hour days.
Yeah, don't we
There's
all?
nothing you can do. Yeah.
I guess the last question to wrap it up a little bit is why don't we see more companies using these upsampled or PGGB files, especially at shows and meets to show off their hardware at its best?
Yeah. Part of it is probably not. I've not tried it. I just don't have the time to go and
Yeah.
ask. Sometimes there's also they don't want you to mess with their system.
Yeah.
They've done this for so many years, and it's like, no, we are not doing no upsampling. No, we'll just do with what we know.
Yeah.
There's definitely some aspects of that. Or some aspects it's like, no, our DAC sounds better in noise mode.
Yeah.
That's what our customers like, and things like there's a whole lot of reasons. But we are trying to get there, and I think what would help is really people who have PGGB licenses, take your music along and ask them to play.
Yeah. I will
You
be
know,
bringing some music to Axpona when we go, so I think it'll be
yeah, yeah,
interesting.
yeah. That will be the best thing, where you can ask someone to play and then see, what they think, and
Hmm.
the more people they ask you, do you have PGGB music? It might help.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting. Well, is there anything else you think I missed or you want to touch on?
No, I think that's. I cannot think of anything else. I'm really happy to have had this. I just want to drop one thing and say there is one more change coming to PGGB. It is not earth-shattering, but it is meaningful improvement in terms of sound quality, and I think there will also be a speed improvement. But I cannot probably a week or two time frame.
Okay, I just finished my library as of yesterday, so it's time to refresh it again, right?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe,
Yeah.
but I'm doing
What?
it. That way, that part I can tell you, I'm doing it.
Good. If you're doing it, I guess I have to do it.
Yeah, which means I have to do it.
Exactly.
We're gonna
Well,
single-handedly reinvigorate Seagate's
yeah.
SSD division.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good talking to you, and thanks for listening and
Of
giving me.
course.
Yeah.